As many of you may know, I've been following the work of Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, who are two historians who started out in the early 1980s researching Dark Age British history, and they have done a lot of work pertaining to King Arthur. And I recommend, if you're not familiar with their work, just go on my website, richplanet.net/history. You'll see all of the TV shows covering Wilson and Blackett's work, and there are some books at the back of the room there. Now, in 1986, their work was recognised by the establishment, because the establishment organisation, the BBC, took interest in what they were doing. They sent two journalists to Wilson and Blackett's property. They looked at the evidence that they had, evidence that King Arthur was a South Wales king, king of Glamorgan and Gwent, with principalities in North, East and West Wales, his kingdom probably extending into England. They were very interested in that, and they, as I say, they came to look at their evidence. Wilson and Blackett showed them various stones, one at Ogmore Castle. They took them to various sites, and they showed them documents which they say prove that King Arthur was a South Wales king that died in 579 AD. So I'm going to show you a clip. This is the BBC 6 o'clock news in 1986.
The time is 6:16. In common with most historians, the two men believe that Arthur was an authentic king of Britain who gave rise to the legends of Camelot, the Sword and the Stone, Guinevere and the Knights of the Round Table. Laurie Mayer reports.
The apparent proof that King Arthur was man, not myth, is kept at the bottom of a garden in Cardiff. This ancient sword-shaped stone inscribed Rex Artorius, King Arthur, comes from what's claimed to be the legendary king's last resting place. The stone is said to have arrived by boat up the Owenny River near Bridgend 1400 years ago. In their lifelong quest for the real King Arthur, amateur historians Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett have put their interpretation on ancient manuscripts.
An impeccably authentic manuscript of the year 822 tells of the body of a very important man with a stone being brought up this estuary. This is the secret burial of Arthur.
The delivery of Arthur's body upriver was, so the story goes, kept secret because his son was too young to succeed him. According to Wilson and Blackett, this is the very cave where the body was temporarily buried. They point to signs of a square-cut grave hewn by hand from the rock. They claim the local church provides evidence of Arthur's family links with the area. Burial stones they regard as vital clues in their historical detective work.
And this is the stone of Paul, son of Myrick, a brother of King Arthur.
At Ogmore Castle, just down the road, they cite another stone actually naming a King Arthmail, which they translate as Arthur. Wilson and Blackett have now filled several volumes with their exhaustive fieldwork and research, a mass of evidence from so many sources that even academics find it hard to contradict. This bleak hillside, 1,000 feet up, marks the end of their quest. In a church they describe as the Westminster Abbey of the Dark Ages. Wilson and Blackett claim it's cost them their homes, their jobs, and £100,000 to find this spot and say with confidence that here lies King Arthur.
So they're not the only experts who claim that King Arthur was a South Wales king. We've got Professor Morgan of Cardiff University stating this on film, which has been screened on Richplanet, the author Chris Barber and various other experts. This is the kind of genealogical chart that Wilson and Blackett have produced over the years. We've got King Arthur here, who's dying in 579 AD. Now, if you go on Wikipedia, you will find some of the names on this chart, but you certainly won't find the King Arthurs. And that's because it's something that the establishment has covered up. And the reasons for that, well, we can speculate. Imagine they're digging up a huge historical figure of British history in South Wales. It's a bit like the Braveheart thing, except King Arthur actually won his battles. So this could be something, it could be the thin end of a wedge which the British establishment may not like. Here's Alan Wilson at work at his house, and you go in their house, it's just full of ancient documents and evidence. And the difference between Wilson and Blackett and university historians is that they don't have students to teach. They can set their own agenda and go off and find new evidences, which not many historians do. And the bleak hillside that was screened there in the BBC article is just here. It's just northeast of Bridgend. It's probably about 25 miles from where we are now as the crow flies in Glamorgan. And it's a place called St Peters-Super-Montem, and this is the church here. Now, that article from the BBC was 1986. They actually had this church excavated in 1990, although the BBC didn't come to film it, but they should have. And it seems that once the information about Wilson and Blackett's research had reached the higher levels of the British establishment, I think something was put in place to suppress their work. It was something that was not going to be accepted. But they ploughed on with their research, and they excavated this ruined church, one of the oldest churches in Europe, in 1990. And one of the things that was found in that excavation is this. This is a solid electrum cross, and on it is inscribed Pro Anima Artorius, which means for the soul of Arthur. Now, I don't think you're going to get much more concrete evidence than that, other than actually finding his body of King Arthur being a South Wales king. This is a close-up. This is possibly Arthur on his horse. Now, this is a certificate which shows the metal content of that cross. They have had it independently tested, and it says on the certificate, the metal cross, which is 79% silver and weighs around 2.5 pounds. The metal content of silver with other metals is consistent with artifacts and relics of antiquity. So you can get an approximate date based on the percentages of different metals, and it is from Dark Ages. Now, as I said, this evidence has been denied by the establishment cover-up. There's been more than one murder attempt of Wilson and Blackett, and if you don't believe that, just have a look on my website and watch all of the programmes which presents all of the evidence of the murder attempts, the smear attempts in the media. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, I asked Alan Wilson who actually excavated that cross, who found the cross, because I wanted to get independent evidence. I wanted, as I said in part one, don't believe anything that you see or hear, go and find it out for yourself. So I wanted to ask and find the person who dug that cross up. Alan told me it was Richard Melbourne, but he'd been informed by a Welsh journalist that Richard Melbourne had passed away. So I then endeavoured to find Richard Melbourne's wife, just so that I could get some independent corroboration that yes, he did dig this cross up, and yes, she can remember when it happened. So I went to his house in Maesteg, knocked on the door. Who answers the door? Richard Melbourne. He's still alive. So I then ring Alan Wilson, and I give the phone to Richard Melbourne, and the two of them had an hour-long conversation reminiscing about the dig, you name it. So he was really pleased that his friend, because Wilson and Blackett now live in the northeast of England, they live in Newcastle. So Richard Melbourne then says to me, well, do you want to come up to the church and I'll actually show you where I found the cross? I said I'd love to. So I went up there. This was just about 3 or 4 weeks ago. That's me and Richard outside St Peter's Church in Glamorgan. And he's pointing there exactly where he dug the cross up. And I've made a piece for the Richplanet TV show all about this, all about Richard Melbourne. Lovely bloke, 80 years old. And as I say, he got one of his mates in a 4x4 to take us up the mountain. Right, I'm in a place called Maesteg, which is not far from Bridgend, and I'm with Richard Melbourne. Now, Richard took part in the archaeological dig organised by Alan Wilson in 1990 of St Peter's Church. Now, on that dig, there was an artefact found, which and Richard was the person who actually dug the thing up. This was the electrum cross. That's right. With Pro Anima Artorius written on it. So, can you just tell us first, Richard, how did you get involved with Alan Wilson, and what was it that got you onto the dig?
Well, I was always interested in Welsh history, you know, and a mate of mine was a mate of Alan Wilson's. Mm-hmm. And he was saying about this dig up in Super-Montem, this church. Would you like to go on it? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So anyway, he arranged for me to go up. And you had to have a permit to get on site. He got me a permit and I went on site. I was there for, I don't know, about a month, I suppose.
What sort of tools did you use?
Well, I was on a trowel. You know.
On a trowel, and what were you be given specific areas to?
Yeah.
To go down.
Yeah.
Right.
Scraping away, boring stuff, all boring stuff, but you know, it has to be done. And this day, I was scraping. It was deep. It must have been on the floor level, around the floor level. It must have been a dirt floor in that church. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I was scraping away and I thought, it's a funny place for a bicycle pedal to be. Because all I could see that bit of silver, you know.
Right.
So I kept scraping away the front of it. And when I'd scraped all the front off, now that cross wasn't showing where pro animo artorius was. That was the other way.
Right, so it was
face
down.
Yeah, well, it was at an angle.
Mm-hmm.
I scraped it off, put the trowel behind it. You can imagine what I thought. Mm-hmm.